Surah Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman. Alhamdulillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman. Bismillah ar-Rahman. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Before I begin, I've been asked just to point out to the youngsters to please try and make it on time, to try and please sit down and listen to the lectures, not just in English but in Urdu as well. Especially Brother Hashim has asked me to say this. So please be careful that the whole point of you coming here is due to the fact that you respect the place and you try to learn as much knowledge as possible. Can I have a loud salawat, please? Can I have another salawat, louder, please? MashaAllah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Okay, yesterday we looked at why was Karbala hidden in history. We can now, having gained so much knowledge and background from my previous lectures, we can start to look at Imam Hussain Aslam's journey to Karbala, now that you have a better understanding. So I'm going to try and keep it simple so that you understand at each point what the journey occurred. Just briefly to point out the fact that Muawiyah began a campaign to designate Yazid as a successor by force through inheritance or monarchy. He broke the last condition of the agreement made between himself and Imam Hassan al-Islam not to make his son Yazid a Khalifa. So just barely touching on that. Nevertheless, Muawiyah sent his agents to the prominent members of the communities to gain allegiance and loyalty for his son. He used as much as influence, bribery, as much as he could to gain this power for his son. But people knew that Yazid was evil and of a drinking type. He was incompetent and pleasure-seeking person. So the people did protest vigorously. There was anger at different parts of Medina and other places. Muawiyah, at the age of 75, became seriously ill. He was nearly towards his death. He lay weak and lifeless, as if something was choking and strangling him. He felt tortured and tormented, and continuously cried for mercy. He was in terrible pain. He wanted to die, but death would not come close to him. Upon Muawiyah's death, the 30-year-old Yazid takes the so-called the high chair, the Khilafat, and begins to rule with an iron fist to further gain control and power. Yazid uses all possible means like bribery, coercion, pressure, threats, and force to receive the people's acceptance of him and his illegitimate rule. He became so arrogant that he refused to listen to Muawiyah's final words. And it's interesting, I read this in a particular place where Muawiyah actually said to Yazid, no matter what you do not ask for the allegiance from Imam Hussain al-Islam. So even Muawiyah knew that he would not get it. But Yazid was arrogant. He thought he could do it. So Yazid commissioned Walid ibn Utbah, his governor over Medina, to ask for Imam Hussein's allegiance of loyalty, or else, upon refusal, have his head. Walid invited al-Hussein to a meeting for this particular purpose. Imam Hussein did not give his word at the meeting and decided to leave Medina along with his family to proceed to Mecca. Again, just briefly to say, this allegiance, did Yazid really need it? He had so much power already when Muawiyah died. And on top of that, he was gaining so much power through his own trickery and bribery. Why did he really need allegiance from Imam Hussain Islam? That is a question that you need to continuously ask yourselves. The reason is because of the approval. If this was Yazid's intention, to try and wipe Islam away, or to change the Islam to what it wasn't, to what it was. So he wanted to change it to the fact that it did not reflect what the Prophet, peace be upon him, brought. So what he tried to do was, he decided that if I was to say, example, it's your choice to pray namaz, or you are allowed to drink, or you can marry within your family, then if he had the allegiance of Imam Hussain Islam, if anybody objected, all he had to do was turn around and say that the grandson of the Prophet, peace be upon him, agrees with me. He has already gave his allegiance. Can you understand how important it was? This is why he wanted this allegiance. So Hussain Islam went to his grandfather's grave. Your ummah are forcing me to leave your town Medina. He had tears in his eyes, knowing that he will never come here again. Grandfather, I will sacrifice everything in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to save the Islam that you delivered. Because Hussain chose to take a stand against Yazid, Imam Hussain was forced to leave his home city under the threat of the assassination by Yazid's men. On the 28th of Rajab 60 AH, Imam Hussain Islam's caravan left Medina with his family and his loyal companions. Hussain made his way towards Mecca in an attempt to avoid any violence in Medina. On 4th of Shaban, Hussein's caravan reached Mecca. Imam had not yet made up his mind on where to go from here. So, for the time being, he decided that during the month of Zil Hajj, he will perform the duty of Hajj. To keep the sanctity and grace of Holy Kaaba, the bloodshed of any human life has been prohibited by the Prophet, peace be upon him. But Yazid, did he care? No, he didn't. While in Mecca, Imam Hussain Islam receives many letters and messages from the people of Kufa persuading him to go to Kufa. Imam decided to send Hazrat Muslim bin Aqil, his cousin, to Kufa to study the situation there and report to Imam, which I did mention yesterday. And meanwhile, Imam Hussain Islam and his companions in Mecca were preparing to perform the duty of Hajj when his friends in Mecca informed him that Yazid's men were planning to have him and his followers murdered during the Hajj. Imam Hussain did not wish that the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be turned into a battlefield. Therefore, he decided to leave Mecca without performing the Hajj. On the 8th of Zil Hajj, the very day on which Hazrat Muslim bin Aqil was murdered in Kufa, Imam Hussain Islam's caravan left Mecca. Imam Hussain did not know of Hazrat Muslim's death at the time. The journey was made on camels and horses. The weather was extremely hot at the time of the year. The Imam, his children, ladies and friends suffered great hardship during the journey. During the journey, Imam learned of the death of Hazrat Muslim bin Aqil and the cruel way in which he had been killed. When Yazid came to know that Imam Hussain Islam was heading towards Kufa, he immediately sent Hur, at the time one of his army commanders, to stop the Imam from joining his followers in Kufa. Hur, with 1,000 men, met Imam Hussain Islam and his companions at a place few miles outskirts of Kufa. Hur and his men forced the Imam to take the road to Karbala, which was situated on the banks of the river Euphrates. Hur was acting on the message from Yazid. The message actually read that force Hussain to halt, but let him stop in an open space without any vegetation or water. Hur conveyed this. Imam Hussain could have fought Hur and his soldiers and forced his way into Kufa, but it was not Imam Hussein's intention to start any battle. On the 2nd of Muharram 61 AH, the Imam, his family and his faithful companions arrived in Karbala. Yazid's armies had already arrived in the area long before the Imam's arrival. It was a huge army consisting of thousands of soldiers. Salawat. Imam Hussain Islam reaches the land of Karbala. He realizes this because the horse suddenly stops. They say Imam Hussain changed many horses, and each time the horse would not move. He then asks for the name of this land. Once he finds out, he addresses his companions. O Allah, we seek refuge in you. This is the land of my companions. This is the land where our blood will spill. This is the land where our men and children will be slaughtered. Then Hussain al-Islam begins to cry, and when others see him, they also begin to cry. Why would Imam Hussain cry? He doesn't cry because he fears his death. No, brothers and sisters. Because he had already delivered a speech in Mecca before he left. When he remembered death, he said, we cannot avoid this death. We need to be patient. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward us because this is the will of Allah, is the will of Al-Bayt. So, what was the reason? The reason was that he remembers how his son Ali Akbar al-Islam is going to die. He remembers how his brother Abbas is going to lose his arms. He remembers how his sister Zainab will scream out loud when she watches Shimmer sit on his chest and continuously striking at his neck with a blunt sword. Imam then ordered the tents to be pitched by the river. It was very hot in Karbala and the supply of water was absolutely essential for survival. Abbas al-Islam, the commander of Hussein's army, when his men started to pitch the tents by the river, the commander of Yazid's army ordered their men to pull out Hussein's tent. They stopped Hussein's tents from being pitched by the river. Abbas became very angry and pulled out his sword, but Imam Hussain Islam quickly intervened, and I will talk more about this when it comes to the night of Hazrat Abbas al-Islam. However, Abbas knew that Imam Hussain Islam is my master, and wherever he instructs, I need to obey. So he put his sword back and ordered his men to pitch the tents away from the river. By the 7th of Muharram, Yazid's army had increased further in number. Now there were 20,000 of Yazid's soldiers surrounding Imam Hussein's 72 men from all corners. They were scattered over miles on the sands of the river bank. On the 7th of Muharram, Yazid's soldiers were told to guard the bank of the river Euphrates so that Imam Hussain al-Islam and his family and companions could not take any water. Heat was intense in the desert and hot winds blew all day. Imam's family and friends suffered without water and food for 3 days. On the 10th of Muharram 61 AH, the battle took place between Yazid's 30,000 soldiers against Imam Hussain Islam's 72 soldiers. Salawat. Okay, in terms of Masa'ib, I want to say something about Hazrat Hur al-Islam tonight. His story applies to everyone. You should never despair from the mercy of God. Hazrat Hur al-Islam and his son Bukair inspires others to change their ways. Often people stop gaining forgiveness, connecting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala once they feel that they've committed so many sins that they feel that, there's no way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive me. Well, put this in perspective. Think about what Hur had done. He was the one who had blocked the water from Imam Hussain Islam and his family. He was the one who stopped Imam Hussain Islam going to Kufa and forced him to go towards Karbala, an open desert. So you can imagine to his mind how great a sin that was. However, Hazrat Hur always showed akhlaq, which is very important. Akhlaq that Hazrat Hur showed towards Hussain was when at one point Imam Hussain Islam says, Hur, you lead the prayer. He replied, how can I when the son of Zara is here? Another time, When Imam Hussain Islam wanted to go towards Kufa, he ends up grabbing Imam Hussain Islam's horse. And he grabs the horse and he says, I cannot allow you to go towards Kufa. Imam Hussain Islam says, may your mother have never given birth to you. Now, just imagine for a second here, we're talking about Hazrat Hur al-Islam, the commander, the brave, and he's got over 1,000 men behind him. He felt humiliated by those words. He could have quite easily have said something similar back to Imam Hussain Islam. However, he replies, if you were the son of any other woman, I would have insulted you. It was this respect that he had for Bibi Zahra al-Islam and her family that he was able to see the difference on the day of Ashura. So what made Hazrat Hur change sides? That is a question that we need to address ourselves. What made him change sides? Because actually, he's walking towards his death, and he could have quite easily have turned around and said, rather than me going into the camp of Imam Hussain Islam, I could quite easily get on my horse and go home. Let's try and address this question. Shimmer says that we will cut off their heads tomorrow, and whereas Hur originally thought that we were here to force Imam Hussain Islam for allegiance towards Yazid, later that night he heard the cries of thirst. He started to think, here is this man Hussain al-Islam who showed me akhlaq by giving me water and to my companions as well as my horses, and yet we have blocked water from his women and children. Hussain gave me water, and yet he will himself lay thirsty on the hot plains of Karbala. The more he thought, the more he was in confusion, fighting within himself the good versus evil. Whenever companions walked by him, they would see him, his face changing pale. They were asking him, what is wrong with you, Hur? You are the brave commander. They couldn't imagine that, be thinking that Hur here, maybe he's afraid of the battle tomorrow. When at dawn he heard Ibn Sa'd say, bring water for my horses. I want to put water over the hooves of my horse so that they don't burn from the desert heat. That was the last straw. He told his son, if I don't go towards heaven, then where else I go, it will be hell. This is the answer to that question, where he could have gone home. He says, if I don't go towards heaven now, if I don't go towards the tent of Imam Hussain Islam, wherever I go, if I walk away, if I go home, it's still hell. I have to go towards heaven. As Hur approaches the tents, he sees Abbas al-Islam stood in front of the tents. He throws himself off the horse and walks over towards Hazrat Abbas with his head down in humiliation. When Imam Hussain Islam hears this, he walks over to Hur. Hur al-Islam says, I am sorry, O Hussain, I didn't know that they would kill you. Look at the level of compassion and spirituality of this man Hussain al-Islam. Straight away, Imam says, I forgive you, Hur. Hur then further seeks to try and to lift the burden from his heart. And what he says is, I want to go out into battle first. Before he does, he sends his son out to battle. On this occasion, Hazrat Hur's son gets struck and falls. Hur was about to go on the battlefield to retrieve him, but Mawla Hussain al-Islam says, no father should be in that position where he picks up the dead body of his own son. But I ask you, O my dear Imam, who will be there to help you when you pick up Hazrat Ali Akbar's body? Who will be there when you pick up Hazrat Ali Askar's body or Hazrat Qasim's body? How will you find that strength? Then Hur al-Islam fights himself and kills many before he too falls off his horse. Imam says to him, Hur, you are free in this world and in the world hereafter. Later in the afternoon of the 10th of Muharram, Ibn Sa'd orders for the hooves of the horses to be sharpened so that we can trample the bodies of Hussein's companions and his family members. Out of humiliation of Hur switching sides, he starts saying that we will start with Hur's body first. However, Hur's relatives and tribes I said, Hazrat Hul, still amongst the army, said, we still feel saddened that you've killed our relative, and therefore we do not want you to trample his body. So Ibn Sa'd tried to go through by one to say which bodies he could trample, but each and everybody had some form of a tribe or relative on that side, except Imam Hussein al-Islam. When Hussein's body was getting trampled, the noise of his crushing bones was loud enough that it forced Bibi Zainab al-Islam out of the tent crying. She turns around and says, "Oh, my grandfather, witness that everyone had claimed their own, but no one claimed to save the body of your grandson Hussein." Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi